This week on The Line Alberta, a closer look at the future of policing in Alberta. The idea of a provincial police force to replace the RCMP seems to have a lot of momentum. But is this about policing, or is this more about Alberta asserting some political independence? That's straight ahead on The Line Alberta Podcast. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of The Line Alberta. My name is Rob Breakenridge. Great to have you along with us. Also, don't forget to check us out at alberta.readtheline.ca. With the Alberta Next panel currently rolling across the province, the Alberta government is keeping the focus squarely on our relationship with Ottawa. A big part of that conversation, of course, is trying to find ways that Alberta can assert some independence and create some distance between our province and the federal government. And so that's put the RCMP and the future of community policing in Alberta squarely at the center of what's become a pretty political debate. The Alberta government does seem quite keen on creating a provincial police force, and already they've taken some small steps in that direction. Now look, obviously Ontario and Quebec, they have their own provincial police forces. And there is probably something to be said for the idea of refocusing the RCMP, making it a truly national police force, and ending policing in small and rural communities across much of the country. Now, we'll talk to one Alberta criminologist a little bit later on about these issues and about some of the pros and cons of Alberta creating its own provincial police force. As it stands, Alberta's contract with the RCMP runs through until 2032. So there are some decisions to be made here by both the provincial government and by the federal government. But in the meantime, that's left rural municipalities caught in the middle, with little say on what happens next, but with some very legitimate concerns about what this could mean for their communities and for their budgets. So up first on The Line Alberta this week, a conversation with Kara Westerlund. She is president of the Rural Municipalities of Alberta and also an elected councillor in the community of Brazeau County. All right, well, joining us for more on the future of policing in Alberta, some of the concerns from rural communities, very pleased to welcome to The Line Alberta, Kara Westerlund, president of the Rural Municipalities of Alberta, also an elected councillor in Brazeau County. Kara, so great to have you with us here.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
So as mentioned, Brazeau County is where you're an elected councillor. That's, I guess, kind of west central Alberta. First of all, tell us a bit more just about your own municipality, what that includes, how large it is, et cetera.
So I'm about an hour and a half southwest of Edmonton. We are heavy into the oil and gas industry and forestry. We roughly have about 6,000 residents, and I think we've got about 400 square kilometers of landmass. We are in a unique part of the province where half of our county is in what we call the white zone, so that's private deeded land, and then the other half is actually in the green zone, which is kind of what we refer to as crown land. So we have a lot of random camping, a lot of activities that happen in the western part of our municipality. And then we have the town of Drayton Valley that's kind of right in the center of our municipality. And we surround the town as well as the village of Breton too as well.
Okay. So obviously policing in Brazeau County, like many other municipalities, rural municipalities in Alberta, that's contracted to the RCMP. So did the detachment then, where are they based out of?
We have two detachments within my municipality. Neither one are actually situated in Brazeau County. So we have a detachment in the town of Drayton Valley, as well as we have a detachment, a bit of a satellite in the village of Breton. And they're a satellite to the Thorsby detachment. And we actually are in two different divisions of the RCMP too as well. So Central and then the Northwest Division. So we're a little bit unique in that way that we have two superintendents and then deal with two different divisions too at the same time. But at the same time, the RCMP are excellent in our area. Okay. Both staff sergeants from both detachments meet quarterly with my municipality. and have a sit down with council, both in the public realm, and then we also sit in a private setting and talk about some of those sensitive issues, generally when names are named and charges haven't been sworn in yet. So that type of sensitive information is just dealt with appropriately.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, the contract, I guess, for RCMP policing goes through until 2032, which is, still 7 years away. But I don't know, to what extent is there now some uncertainty, I guess, in the future of policing in Alberta? What's your sense of where we're at here?
Well, to be quite frank, there's a lot of turmoil about what's going to be done in the province and what policing is going to look like. Even in the next couple of years, we talk about the contract ending in 2032. So what it's going to look like in the 7 years, if that's going to be extended. The unfortunate part is what's happening, and the conversations are not happening at the tables that they need to be happening. Obviously, policing is a very important topic, and for all of our residents in our province, not just in rural Alberta, but every single resident, whether you live in the rural or the urban area. And the unfortunate part that we're facing right now is those conversations, the announcements that we're hearing in the media, we're finding out about them the same time everyone else is. We don't have any of the background information, none of the planning. Obviously, budgets are a huge impact for us. So, it's interesting. I do say and make this comment once in a while, but the province does a great job of telling Ottawa and the federal government how they're stepping on their toes, and now we're telling the province how they're stepping on our toes.
Yeah, so people understand that arrangement, the contract policing aspect with the RCMP. The federal government then, they contribute to that, or they cover a part of those costs?
Yes, they do. So as it stands right now, they are covering a portion of contract policing. The province picks up the rest of that and then bills it out to the municipalities. So right now, my municipality of about 6,000 people, up until about 4 years ago, we actually didn't quote unquote pay into policing per se. What we were actually doing is paying for front end staff within the detachment. We were paying for criminal analysts, and we actually had a couple of officers that we actually paid for too as well. We had a corporal position too. That changed about 4 or 5 years ago, where the province started billing municipalities, quote unquote, the ones that weren't paying previously, even though we were, and just in a different way. We're now paying just over $1 million for service in our community.
So just a few days ago, we had Rocky Mountain House, and the report that they commissioned to look at policing options found that the RCMP still seems to make the most sense, at least as the most cost-effective option. So I guess that speaks to how municipalities are trying to come at this, right? To look at what they need, what these costs are, and what makes the most sense for them.
Agreed. And that's the type of work that needs to be done. And at the end of the day, most municipalities and most elected officials in the municipal world we're not trying to play politics with this. We honestly look at what truly matters for our residents. And obviously the cost is pretty high up on that list. Obviously, safety is probably number one. And the next part is that cost analysis. And that's been the unfortunate part too, with dealing with some of the rhetoric that we're hearing out in the media right now around a provincial police force. And the talk around that is just, there's no clear plan. There's no budgeting process for us to have a look at to see. It's great that Rocky Mountain House has gone out and taken a look at that. Because at the end of the day, it's us who's going to be paying for this. And you know what, you and I both know too, when we're talking about policing, most often than not, the issue is not policing in our communities. It's the judicial system that's causing us the issues. So it's the same handful of offenders getting released and causing, probably 90 to 98% of the issues in our communities.
Right. Yeah, that's an important point. So recently we had the announcement from the Alberta government about this Alberta Sheriff's Police Service. And, I think you alluded to earlier that some of these announcements, you seem to be learning about them at the same time everybody else is. So was that the case with this announcement, first of all?
Yes, it was. Many of the announcements that are coming out on the policing side, that's exactly how we're finding out about them. We're not even getting up. Normally, what we see with the provincial government in announcements like this, we usually get, sometimes 24 to 48 hour notice or some sort of, white flag being waved and letting us know that this is coming out. We're getting none of that. The conversations are just not happening. And we're trying to address and ask questions as things are rolling out. And what's coming clear and evident as this is moving forward is there doesn't seem to be a clear plan about what this is going to look like, how these pieces are going to fit together, and who's going to be paying for it at the end of the day. And I think that's what we're really concerned about. And like I've mentioned too, if you talk to most people, we don't have a policing problem in this province or in this country. We've got a judicial problem. So throwing, more officers, more boots on the ground, changing, going from RCMP to a provincial police force, I'm not sure how that's going to solve those problems.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. So in terms then of this new police service, I guess, is this meant to be an option for municipalities who want to make a change, or something that's there to supplement what's already in place, or is that clear at this point?
It isn't clear at this point. We're hearing a bit of both that it's here to replace. We're hearing that it's to augment what's already out there. I think the other piece too to mention with the Alberta sheriffs as well is when we're doing some digging and looking into this and peeling back some of the layers. One of the shocking things that we've managed to find out with the Alberta Sheriffs Association and with that branch is that there's no accountability piece. So a big part of what we do obviously is pay the bills at the end of the day. But governance is a large portion of what we do as elected officials, and policies and bylaws and that type of background work needs to be done. So when we kind of poked around and had a look, with the Alberta Sheriffs is we found no clear path for accountability. They're basically accountable to nobody. There is no documents, anything that we can find out, or any information that we can find out. So you and I both know if we get ourselves into a situation and we need to make a complaint against the RCMP, that there's a third party process that goes through, and there's an investigation. Just so you're aware, that does not happen with the Alberta Sheriffs. There is no process and no protocol for that, which is extremely concerning for us.
Yeah, I would imagine so. It was interesting to, the Alberta government has this whole Alberta Next panel set up, and they're talking about a lot of these ideas. And I think, unfortunately, policing has been caught up in this whole Alberta versus Ottawa narrative. But there was some pushback against one of these videos that was part of the Alberta Next process. And I know the RCMP had expressed some frustration at some of the claims being made, like the idea that members are suddenly being yanked out of communities and sent across the country, or that the RCMP is taking orders from Ottawa and they're not working with or listening to the concerns or the priorities of local communities. What did you make of that?
It's quite frankly, it's not what we're seeing on the landscape. With my role through RMA, as well as an elected official in my community, so two parts. I'll maybe come at this as a local official from Brazeau County. I know I'd mentioned earlier our RCMP are incredibly accessible to council. They're nimble and they're quick to address or move and shift focus in another way if we've brought some issues to their attention. Both, like I said, both detachments, even though they're in two different divisions, both meet regularly with my council. I know they meet regularly with the Village of Breton. They meet regularly with the town of Drayton Valley too as well. They bring us the real-time stats. The information comes forward. If we've got concerns or hot spots in the community that we're hearing about from our end, I can pick up the phone right now and call our local staff sergeants and have a conversation with them and just flag, hey, I got a couple calls from some residents. This is what I'm hearing. Are you able to shift? And sometimes they're already on top of it. They're like, hey, we know what's going on. We're able to shift officers and spread the focus on over here to deal with this issue. Now, from a provincial perspective, With my position at RMA, I've actually been sitting with the division executive committee with the RCMP. So that's actually all the superintendents right across the province, and the top, the top brass within the RCMP, and we meet quarterly too as well. So again, that door is open. I'm a part of the business plans, a part of the planning that goes involved with what the focuses are provincially with the RCMP. So to hear some of what has been said through the Alberta Next is, it's kind of disheartening because it's just flat out not true. And it's definitely not the experience that I've had either within my own community or from the RMA provincial level.
Yeah. I mean, does it feel like municipalities then are kind of caught in the middle of this political fight right now?
It absolutely does. It feels like we're caught in the middle of the political storm. And I think the thing that's most disheartening for us is at the end of the day, we're the ones that are going to be footing the bill for this. And that's why we're pushing back and asking the questions that we are, because provincial policing and policing in general is paid through the property tax, which is the portion of the taxes that municipalities collect. So, if this is, and I've said this before, if this is the path that the province wants to go down, then say it. But then come to the table and let's be open and honest and frank about what we're doing and where we're going. And let's be open and honest about the cost and who's going to be paying for it. Because I do not think the average everyday citizen realizes just how much this is costing and going to cost.
Right. I mean, there is the possibility, come 2032, if the federal government decides to go in a different direction. And I know the province has sort of pointed to this. I think there was a white paper done recently on this topic, maybe making the RCMP into kind of like Canada's FBI, right? A truly national police force, and that there would be some kind of transition across the country where there is contract policing to something new. If we're going to go that direction, what kind of onus would there be on the federal government to support that sort of transition? And I guess a role for the province to play as well.
Well, there would be a huge role for the federal government to play in this. So, I mean, let's be honest. Let's take a countrywide lens on this. Provinces like Manitoba, many of the maritime provinces, Saskatchewan, even to a bit. There's no way that they can afford their own provincial police forces. It's just not something it's feasible to happen. So, if we're going to talk about shifting and what that's going to look like, so then part of that conversation with that national lens on it is going to be, well, what's going to happen to provinces like that? And again, Alberta, often we hear it is, we complain that we're always picking up the buck and we're always paying for everything. Well, here's another case that if we're going to walk down this path, we're going to be paying a lot more than our fair share. And it looks shiny and great on the surface, but I think when you really dig down and look into it, it might not be the best path forward for us or for the country.
We'll see where this all goes from here. Much more at rmalberta.com. Kara, thank you so much for joining us here. Appreciate your perspective on this.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, and thank you to your listeners and your viewers too as well.
All right, well, joining us now for some further perspective and insight on the future of policing in Alberta, this idea of creating an Alberta Provincial Police Force. Very pleased to welcome to the line Alberta, Dr. Kelly Sundberg, Professor of Criminology at Mount Royal University. Kelly, so great to have you with us here.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
It's interesting. We've been talking about this issue for, at least 5 years now, I suppose, maybe even longer. But does it feel like things are really starting to move in this direction? Or what's your sense of where we're at right now, first of all?
Well, there's a few aspects that indicate that this is the way it's going to go, not just in Alberta, but across Canada. When Justin Trudeau left his post as Prime Minister, he wrote a brief or commissioned a brief, basically noting that the RCMP needs to focus on its federal policing mandate and get in turn would be getting out of the role of contract policing at the provincial and municipal levels. And in British Columbia, in 2022, there was a legislative committee looking at policing in British Columbia, and they in fact, so this is a BC dominant province, they in fact in 2022 recommended the creation of a British Columbia provincial policing, and we've heard about this in Alberta, like you said, for man, it's got to be about at least 5, maybe 6 years or so more. I am a believer in Alberta and other provinces having their own provincial police. I think that the RCMP has been stretched right to the breaking point, that their capacity to be all things to all people has long since diminished, and that it is time for our province to follow Ontario and Quebec. And actually, to go back in time, the last time a provincial police service was created was the Alberta Provincial Police back in the early 1900s. So full circle of history there.
So even though, I mean, this is like an Alberta conversation, we're talking about the future of policing in Alberta, it definitely is connected to the conversations of the provinces, even I guess the conversation in Ottawa, right, about the future of the RCMP.
It really is. The RCMP has, like I said, they've really been the police in Canada. They're known around the world. If you talk to somebody anywhere, if you say policing in Canada, their first thing in their mind is going to be the RCMP. The RCMP transitioned in February, I think it was 1920, thereabouts, from the Northwest Mounted Police and the Dominion Police were combined to create today's RCMP. Provinces that traditionally have had smaller populations, us and here in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, the Atlantic provinces have used the RCMP as their provincial police service, largely because of cost. But with the RCMP, you do get a package that includes a lot of federal resources, and that is attractive to provinces. Nevertheless, though, they report to Ottawa. It doesn't matter that they're under contract with us. The boss is in Ottawa, and there are some challenges politically when you think about the mandate or the direction of your provincial or municipal force. If it's the RCMP, you're convincing Ottawa, not Edmonton. The other issue the RCMP has had is they've traditionally been. They used to be one of the higher paid police services. Now they're actually one of the lowest. And when their training is quite antiquated compared to other policing services in the country. They haven't been able to, for their uniformed policing, they've fallen behind in their recruitment abilities, although they are getting more and more recruits. They're also getting a lot of retirements, so it's very difficult for the RCMP to maintain a full complement of officers, which at the municipal level especially causes a lot of frustration. So the challenge with the provincial police is I don't think that they'll have an easier time than the RCMP hiring people. People just aren't applying to police services. So the RCMP has suffered from recruiting issues, but also with their officers being on various types of leave, retiring. So their staffing levels have been a challenge. I would guess that even when the Alberta police are under full swing, they're going to have a difficult time maintaining those numbers also. We're seeing that with Calgary Police, Edmonton Police, and other police services that are experiencing that same challenge of young people just don't want to become cops anymore.
How much do you think this has become wrapped up in politics a bit, though? And I know it's a little outside of your wheelhouse, but, there's the policing conversation, what makes sense for Alberta, or, even what makes sense for policing in Canada. But the idea of, police force with the Alberta flag and doing our own thing and not relying on Ottawa, it seems like that's a big component of all of it.
It's definitely been sold to us that way. And my undergrad's actually in political science, so without question, politicking is all over this matter. But politics has always been a big part of policing. One of the reasons why we have the RCMP is because the concerns of corruption and the intertwining of city halls and police chiefs in the small prairie towns over the centuries. If anyone any of your listeners go to Saskatchewan to the tunnels of Moose Jaw. There's some fantastic material there on the corruption of the police and the back in the time of Prohibition. So we've seen politics play into policing, and that's why we have, in fact, one of the big reasons is the corruption, the politicking was why we saw the RCMP become the predominant policing service for our country, municipal and provincial policing. With regards to the Alberta Provincial Police and how it's moving forward, I will say this: I get phone calls from politicians and from elected officials coast to coast asking questions about policing. I guess I'm on the news enough. I get enough of them. I have to say I'm quite impressed with the discussions I've had with individuals here in Alberta. Very sincere, looking at how do we move this new police service forward, which is very positive. So that is there. From what I've seen, and I have spoken with a number of people in our provincial government, asking some really good questions about what is policing and the move towards the notion of professionalization of policing. So policing is an occupation currently, and around the world, we look at countries like Finland, Australia, even in the United States with their it's called POST, Peace Officer Standard Training. We see this certification of becoming a police officer. So there's criteria you have to meet at a state or a provincial level, a regional level. You have to meet this criteria, and you have a professional body, just like you would have like the Law Society or the College of Physicians and Surgeons, that certify or license someone who meets the criteria to become a police officer and to build policing on that modern idea of a profession as opposed to an occupation. We haven't got there in Canada yet, but I am quite hopeful that there is an appetite for improving policing and not to just cookie cutter what we have as an 1800s model from the Peel Metropolitan Police or the Royal Irish Constabulary period when we had where policing is today in Canada. It's kind of a combination. We haven't changed the paradigm of policing in this country since it's based on that 1800 model. So there is a willingness, I guess is a long way to say it, there is a willingness from what I've seen within the political leadership of Alberta, as well as senior bureaucrats, looking at the importance of doing taking a new road in policing and figuring out how to utilize technology, be more professional. So that's a really good sign. For the RCMP, I think that the new head for Alberta, Trevor DeRue, who was a deputy with Calgary Police, really quite a very strong leader and a very well respected. So our provincial policing, as it stands currently with the RCMP, the leadership they have there is very strong. Interestingly enough, Sat Parhar, who has been slated as the next chief or the first chief of the new Alberta Police, also coming as a deputy chief from Calgary Police. So there's, it's interesting to see that for both our leadership in provincial policing. Currently, it's a former deputy of Calgary Police with the RCMP, and very soon it'll be another former deputy chief of Calgary Police for the Alberta Provincial Police.
The cost issue. I mean, rural municipalities are concerned that, they might have to take on more costs because there is that partial subsidy from Ottawa. I think there's the broader concern in Alberta that we're building something new from scratch. There's a cost to that as well. So how do we, I guess there's also the question of, okay, if there's some benefit, how do we balance cost and benefit? But what about some of those challenges?
Well, I think that a big concern that I have is around the cost. And I feel that we, both our policing in the country, we haven't been spending money as strategically as we could. We see huge costs. Like, look at the border. We've leased 2 Black Hawk helicopters, the federal government, to fly from coast to coast. These are the most expensive arrests ever. I think there might have 20 some odd arrests now. The cost of those helicopters versus the actual arrests, it's astronomical. So we see crazy cost overruns and just politicking in federal policing at a level of nonsensical level. It's unbelievable. Provincially, we're really frugal when it comes to policing. Calgary, Edmonton, Lethbridge, even smaller communities like Tabor and our First Nations police, we squeeze a lot. We squeeze every penny out of our policing. We're very economical in Alberta compared to other areas for policing. We have less officers per population in a lot of our areas, which is a concern. But there's something to be said. It's 2025. The model we're using was created in the 1800s. Policing is an expensive undertaking, but when we have better educated cops, when we have if we do move towards a professional model, that will include other provincial institutions such as our universities, and looking at efficiencies, that's part of a profession. That's money well spent. And for public safety, if we can figure out a model that allows us to more effectively integrate technologies to augment that lowering number of officers, the officers we do have, that we build their capacity so they're highly educated, well-trained, well-equipped, so that they can do more with less, which they have to do anyway. So let's set up the framework. I look at this constantly, and I would question those small towns. How many of the Mounties are actually there, or how many of them are moved to another, like the border? How many of them have moved to Kananaskis, or were moved to Kananaskis? Like the thing you get with the RCMP is when they need to move a body, they'll move a body. So the staffing level that a municipality is hoping to have is never at that level. It's always quite a bit lower. Easier to hold your provincial government accountable than the federal government in many respects. So there is a big price tag, and it's going to be a big price tag. It's one we're going to have to pay anyways. So I'm quite excited to see Alberta moving forward with this. I hope that we are the model that the rest of Canada follows. We have some incredible people that I've met that are engaged in this.
Yeah.
I think that it's a price tag, but it's one that we have to pay.
Well, do we need some further clarity, whether it's from the Alberta government to say, okay, we're going down this path, or the federal government to say we're going to change the mandate of the RCMP and here's how we'll help with the transition? 2032 isn't that far away. And I guess we do need to know where things are going, don't we?
Yeah, we're literally just a few years away, 7 years away, and we'll see this transition. There has been a lot more recently with the announcement of Sat Parhar as the whatever they're going to call the chief or the chief constable for the provincial service. I would imagine it's going to take some time to wrap up the provincial police. In saying that, a lot of the detachments actually are owned. I just discovered this fairly recently, that the detachments that are run by the RCMP largely are owned by the province anyways. So there is real estate, if you will, that the province already has. And, of course, there's going to be new police officers. You'll have provincial police officers, some coming from the sheriff, some coming from other areas. However, what we inevitably will see, and we have to, is you'll see a lot of the same officers. So the same individuals who currently have RCMP patch on their shoulder will have a provincial police patch. That will be some of them. So it's really the people who are policing your community. It doesn't matter what uniform they're wearing or where they get their paycheck. It's that individual. And if we can, if we do see, and we're starting to see that, this move to having better selected officers, not saying that we don't do a good job now, but having a better system, having better resources for the officers, and having policing move to that professional model. This is fantastic for all of us, and the efficiencies and the effectiveness. I'll say another important part is that we have seen is the in Alberta is the Police Review Commission. So taking the professional standards, or that police investigating themselves, out of the municipal service and having a province-wide approach, which is done in a number of provinces. That was very smart. That will be very effective. That will allow officers that currently are doing those jobs in predominantly Edmonton and Alberta to move back to the streets. You'll see some resourcing in our municipal areas because of that. That's a very good move. And we're also starting to see some innovation around partnering with universities and colleges for the resources, the scientific resources specifically, in helping address crime issues. So at Mount Royal, we have some professors, for instance, who will work with wildlife enforcement officers if they have issues with poaching and these sort of things, where they can give some advice. Myself and some of my colleagues do give some input and also study. So there's this move away from everything being inside and opening it up. We have a long way to go, but there's a lot. I'm very optimistic of where we're going, and I do see this as an expensive, albeit an expensive without question, an expensive, but a very good investment in our province. I think that in the long run, we will see efficiencies that we don't see with the RCMP, and we'll also see more stability in staffing levels.
Yeah, well, we'll see where it all goes from here, but we do appreciate your insight on this, and thank you so much for making some time for us here, Dr. Sundberg.
Thanks a lot, Rob. It's always great. Take care.
All right, and our thanks once again to Dr. Kelly Sunderland, who's a criminologist, professor of criminology at Mount Royal University, and of course, Kara Westerlund, who is president of the Rural Municipalities of Alberta. And we'll see where this issue goes from here. It's clearly not going away. It's been front and center in the Alberta Next panels, as we talked about with Kara Westerlund. The Alberta government even took some flack for the way in which they've been framing some of the questions around the RCMP, very much tilted, it seems, in the direction of wanting a provincial police force. And maybe that's a legitimate aspiration. Like we talked about, this is coming up in other jurisdictions in Canada, in BC, in Atlantic Canada. And I think there are some legitimate issues about how community policing should be done in this country. And again, maybe the RCMP should be more like Canada's FBI, and we should have provincial or local policing take over these responsibilities in smaller communities. I think Alberta, though, is unique in this being such a political debate, in that it's not just about policing. It's about our relationship with the federal government, wanting to be a little more independent. The idea of a police force with the Alberta flag seems to have a lot of resonance right now in Alberta, with so much of the political debate that's happening around independence and the future of our relationship with the federal government. So that's going to keep driving this conversation. I don't know if that's good or bad in a conversation that should really just be about policing, but I think in Alberta, it's really tough to separate these issues. So we'll continue to follow that story as it evolves. Like I say, it doesn't seem like this is going away. I don't know if it's inevitable that we're going toward a provincial police force, but it certainly seems to have some momentum behind it right now. That's where we'll leave it for this episode of the Line Alberta podcast. Again, don't forget to check us out at alberta.readtheline.ca. We'll have another episode for you coming up next Wednesday. My name is Rob Breakenridge. Thanks so much for being with us here on the Line Alberta podcast.